This is the new 2022 Land Rover Defender 90 V8, and it's absolutely insane. I say that because this is the short wheelbase two-door version of the new Land Rover Defender, but it has a 520 horsepower V8 and a sticker price of around $115,000. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some great sales recently, including this electric Hummer pickup sold for $235,000. This fantastic 80 series Land Cruiser sold for $33,000. There's a lot of interest in the 80 series right now. And this wonderful Sprinter van sold for just under $50,000. We do great with vans and camper vans on Cars and Bids. So if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. Check it out at carsandbids.com. So let's talk Defender. The new Land Rover Defender came out a couple years ago and it offered the choice between a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder engine. But now there's an available V8. And not just any V8, but a supercharged one with 520 horsepower. It's available in the 4-door Defender model, the 110, or in this, the 2-door Defender 90, which means this has 520 horsepower in a vehicle that's as long as a Toyota Yaris. It seems insane, and today I'm going to review it. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the new Defender 90 V8 and show you all of its quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug's score. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features, the new Defender 90 V8, with a general overview of this vehicle, because basically this entire thing is one giant quirk. So, the Defender lineup, there's a base model 4-cylinder with about 300 horsepower. You can also upgrade to a 6-cylinder with about 400 horsepower, but then there's this, a supercharged V8 with 520 horsepower, a seriously huge number, especially for the Defender 90. Now, they're offering this V8 in both new Defender body styles, the 2-door Defender 90, this car, or the 4-door Defender 110. 0 to 60 for the 110 is 5.2 seconds, but here it's 4.9 seconds. And this one is so much quicker because it's so much smaller. The Defender 90 is only 170 inches long if you don't count the spare tire. Now, a Toyota Yaris subcompact, the cheapest entry-level Toyota, is 174 inches long. So this is a subcompact car-sized vehicle with a 520 horsepower V8. And to really drive home the point of how crazy this is, the new Jeep Wrangler 392, the big V8 muscle car Jeep Wrangler, that has less horsepower than this, 470 versus 520 here, and Jeep is only offering that engine in the 4-door body style to keep things a little bit rational. Land Rover had no such goal with this car. This has more power, and you can get it as a tiny 2-door, 520 horsepower, 170 inches long. But anyway, let's talk through some of the other changes to the V8 Defender besides its massive powertrain. Two of them you can see very clearly right here. One is the V8 badge on the front doors. That's one way to distinguish the V8 Defender from the non-V8 models. You also have blue brakes in the V8s, although only up front. Blue brake caliper up front. In back, you don't have a matching blue caliper, which seems like an odd decision, but that's what they've decided to do. Now, the V8 model also has larger brakes, as you might imagine, to keep the extra power in check. 15-inch brakes, and the V8 has larger wheels. It comes standard with these 22-inch wheels, which look very cool and sort of sporty in keeping with the V8 situation. But if you want a more off-roady experience, you could also pay a little extra to go down to 20-inch wheels, but then get all-terrain tires. So if you want to combine the V8 and off-road performance, that's probably what you'll want to do. Now, one other big and notable change to the V8 Defender is around back. The exhaust exhaust. You can see a quad exhaust back here, very distinctive, and it sounds great. Take a listen to a little rev. And there are still a few other changes to the V8 worth noting. A big one is colors. The regular Defender is offered in a wide range of colors. For the V8, you can only get white, black, or gray. This one is the gray color, but this is also a special Carpathian edition model, which has a few cosmetic changes, but the primary one is the gray is satin finished. You can see kind of a dull matte finish instead of a bright shiny paint, and that's what you get with the Carpathian. Now, pricing is another interesting thing with the V8 Defender. This starts around $105,000, which is huge money, but it's a huge engine. This one is equipped to around $115,000. Most of that extra cost is for the Carpathian edition, plus a few relatively inexpensive options. And if you want to get the four-door version, figure about $3,000–$4,000 more to add four-door practicality, but you lose some of the insanity of the two-door Defender V8. Now, a couple of other V8 changes that you can't see on the outside. For one, there's an active electronic rear differential in the V8 models. That is optional on the regular Defender, but it is standard on the V8s. You also have beefier control arms in the Defender 90 V8, and they're big muscular things, so you can go anywhere and do anything. And you have a new mode in the drive mode system, which Land Rover calls the terrain response system. Other Defender models have off-road modes. This one adds a new mode called dynamic mode because it adds more power, it adds bigger wheels. This is for dynamic, sporty driving. I'm not exactly sure how dynamic it can get, but I guess that new mode will help. But while the V8-ness of this Defender is quite interesting and amusing, this is also important because it's a two-door, and I haven't actually reviewed a two-door Defender 90 yet. I reviewed the Defender back when it first came out 2 years ago as a four-door model, and then I bought one. I own a 2020 Land Rover Defender four-door, but I haven't yet reviewed a two-door Defender 90 on my channel. So let's take a look at the back seat. To get back here, there's a little latch on the side of the front seat. You pull on it, and then you can tap this little button to move the seat forward, and it goes, and it goes, and it goes, and it takes a little time, but eventually the seat moves forward enough that you can climb inside, and I will now do that. It's still a little tight. Ugh. Whew. But I made it. Now, interesting thing in the back seat. For one, it's actually pretty nice back here. Even with the seats back in place, you have pretty decent room in the back of the Defender 90, which surprised me. I was expecting it to be heavily compromised in back, but that's really not so. It's pretty good. And the experience of being in the back of this thing is made even better with some cool features, like, for example, absolutely massive windows. These huge side windows back here really cut down on the claustrophobic feeling that a lot of two-door cars have. You just don't have it here, and that's a very distinctive thing about the new Defender 90 on the outside. You can see massive windows on the rear sides, and that translates to a lot of light coming in when you're sitting in the back. You also have these cool safari windows on the roof, which is a very, very neat touch. It also adds some light and makes the rear seats an even cooler place to be. Now, I have these safari windows in my Defender 110, the four-door version, but unfortunately, they're over the cargo area, so rear passengers don't really get to use them. In the Defender 90, you do use them, you can look out them, and they're pretty cool. And to improve things even more in this vehicle, you have a massive sunroof, this huge glass panel over both rows of seats, which also cuts down on that feeling of claustrophobia in back. You really just don't have it. Good rear seat room and kind of a nice open, airy feel, which is surprising. And you have some nice amenities back here. For one thing, cup holders. They're mounted on the floor, strangely enough, but they're back here for your drinks, and you have a couple more if you fold down the center armrest, so you can maximize your cup holder experience. Maybe more importantly though, in the rear center control area on the back of the front center console, you have a lot of different stuff. Charge ports is one, 2 different USB-C ports plus 2 more cigarette lighter style ports, so you can charge all your devices back here, and you have rear seat climate control, 2-zone rear seat climate control. Both rear passengers can adjust their temperature, and of course the fan speed, where the air comes out, can all be adjusted back here. Of course, the reason these two-door models have all these controls is because because this is also sold as a four-door version. So that center control area back here is just lifted from the four-door, where the back seats will probably be used more frequently. But still, it's nice to see so many controls and comfort features in the back of a two-door vehicle. So despite the new Defender's small size, the back seat is pretty useful and pretty comfortable, but a vehicle this tiny, you gotta make a trade-off somewhere, and in the new Defender, that trade-off comes in the cargo area, which you can see is really, really tiny. In my four-door Defender, the cargo area is gotta be at least twice this size. This one is just really small. Not all that much space for cargo because they prioritized rear seat room instead. Now, if you want more space, you can of course fold down the rear seats very easily. This little latch, you just kind of pinch it and then push the seat forward and it's down, and then you have more cargo space, but obviously you can't have a passenger in those back seats. But anyway, a few interesting quirks of the cargo area in the new Defender. One is over on the side behind this little panel, lift it up, and there is a household style power outlet right there, which is fantastically useful. I use mine all the time in my Defender to charge larger items, including like a computer. Plug it in there and you can even use it as a passenger on long trips. I really love that feature. Also interesting, on the inside of the cargo area door back here, the tailgate door, you have this little storage compartment, very small, but surprisingly useful. If you want some small item to go in the back, you don't want to forget it, you don't want it rolling around, you can stick it back there and it's a cool little position. Also, one other quirky thing about the cargo area in the new Defender is that this is the cargo cover. This little cloth piece, you stick it into these holes in the side of the cargo area, and then that's your cargo cover, this flimsy little panel. It's kind of strange, and it's certainly not as easy to position as one that just rolls into place like most cars have, but it does have one nice benefit, which is that it can expand. So if you have stuff in the cargo area that's pretty tall, it can push into the cargo cover, and the cover will still conceal it because it's very floppy. But anyway, since I'm around back in the new Defender, a few other items to cover on the outside, starting with the taillights, which are absolutely bizarre. You have two larger sort of square taillights, as you can see, in the inside panel, and then two smaller square taillights on the outside panel. Now, here in North America, these function as brake lights. They all light up until you turn on your turn signals, and then whichever side turn signal is on completely lights up. All four of the squares light up as turn signals, turning off the brake light on that side. In other markets, the brake lights are the inner larger ones, and the turn signals are the outer smaller ones. But regardless, this is a very interesting design, and you may be wondering why exactly Land Rover did it. I asked someone at Land Rover what's the deal with these brake lights, and they told me it was intended to be a throwback to the old school Defenders that had like little lights in the corners. That's why you have these tiny little additional brake lights, and I took that explanation. It made sense at the time and I was all good. However, I have since learned that it was regulatory. The reason they did this is because of rear sight lines. Several governments require the brake lights to be visible from certain angles around the car, and because the spare tire is mounted in the back, those regulations weren't being met by the regular brake lights, the inner ones, so they had to stick the outer brake lights on as well in order to meet those sightline regulations. And that's why you have two rather strange sets of brake lights in the new Land Rover Defender. But anyway, other interesting items worth noting. Around back, you have these recovery hooks, as you can see, so you can pull people if they get stuck, or they can pull you if you get stuck, which is nice, except the Defender doesn't have any recovery hooks in front, and you can't add them, which is a huge annoyance for anybody like me who actually off-roads their Defender. You want to have hooks on both sides, but you can't get it in the new Defender in front. Very disappointing. There is a winch available, which serves a similar purpose, but it's tremendously expensive, and hooks would have been great. One other interesting item in front is the radar sensors in the front grille are built into the Land Rover logo. The logo is actually one big sensor cap, and so that's where like your adaptive cruise control and forward braking sensors are all located, which is a cool little place to hide them so you don't have some ugly sensor sticking out in the front bumper. But anyway, next we move back inside the new V8 Defender up to the front seat, where you have quite a few interesting quirks and features, including a few V8 specific quirks. Open up the door, for example, and it says V8 on the door sill, not Land Rover Rover Defender, just V8, because that's all you need to know. You also climb further inside and you'll discover an Alcantara steering wheel. The standard model doesn't have that, but the V8 does, and it feels nice and luxurious, at least for now, until it wears away with the oils on your hands. You also have Alcantara seat centers in here. You can see partially leather, partially Alcantara. In my Defender, I got half leather, half cloth, so the Alcantara really classes things up a bit. But those are the only really big V8 upgrades on the inside. Other than that, it's mainly standard Defender up here, and probably the biggest notable item is this center screen, which is relatively large. This is new for 2022. It's a larger available screen in the Defender, just under 12 inches compared to my 2020 model, which has a paltry 10-inch screen. This is much bigger, but it's the same basic screen functionality, just on a larger scale, so things are easier to touch and see on this screen. Now, one interesting feature available in this screen is that this vehicle includes Land Rover's wade sensing system, which will actively measure the depth of water that you're wading through and let you know if it's getting too high. You can see sort of the maximum line here, which is 30 inches up the car, and it will measure in real time as you drive through a puddle or a stream and let you know how far the water is coming up on the side of your car, which is pretty cool. I also have this feature in my new Defender. I've tested this and it works pretty well, which is neat to see. One other cool quirk of this infotainment system from someone who has a little experience with this, the cameras. You have this cool around view camera system that you can see from the outside, basically looking at the car, which is neat, but a lot of cars have that. The cool thing here is you can leave it on as you drive. Most cars turn off their camera system above 5-10 miles an hour, but not here. If for some reason you want the cameras to be going while you're cruising down the road, you can do that, and you can watch your Defender as you sit in the driver's seat watching the road. It's a bizarre feature, but I find it kind of funny. Aside from those interesting infotainment quirks, this operates like a relatively standard infotainment system. I have to say, I like it. I've lived with my new Defender for almost 2 years now, this same system, just on a slightly smaller screen, and it works great. I especially like the 3-panel home screen, which can tell me several different things at once, which I always love to see in infotainment systems, but this system is also reasonably responsive, pretty intuitive, and it works quite well, and I don't really have any complaints except my screen is too small, which is remedied in this one. And the screens in the new Defender get even better because you also have a gauge cluster screen, which is truly, truly fantastic. I love how this operates. It's big, high resolution, and tremendously configurable. You can have this display basically whatever you want. One dial in the center you can see here with the map and the radio on either side, or you can change the map and you can change the radio to show different things, or you can change this configuration altogether. You can have a full screen map in here, for example, which is tremendously useful if you're trying to navigate somewhere. You can see it directly in front of you on this screen, or you can have multiple gauges in here like a more traditional gauge cluster setup, which is also relatively useful for some people. I love configurable gauge cluster displays. It's right in your line of sight and it makes life very easy when you drive, and this car has one of the best ones. Now, the Defender also has an available heads-up display, which you can see here, and I gotta say, it doesn't really show you all that much. Yes, your speed, which is useful, but it's not too much higher than the gauge screen, and other than that, you're not getting that much great info from this screen. Some cars do heads-up displays tremendously well. New Defender is a little short on information. I don't have the heads-up display in my new Defender, and frankly, I'm kind of happy that I skipped it. But anyway, on to some other quirks of this interior. For one thing, the rear view mirror. You can see right now it's a mirror, but if you flip this switch, it becomes a screen, which is a fantastic feature, especially if you're going to fill your car full of stuff. You won't be able to see out the back, but you can if your mirror is a screen. I love this feature on my new Defender. Another interesting item in here is the center console, which is not just storage, but also a cooler. You can press this button and turn on a cooler, and then keep like a sandwich cool, your lunch, whatever you want, which is a neat idea. Actually, you could say it's a cool idea. Anyway, directly next to this center console, you have this little panel here, which looks like a place where you can just stick a phone or something else. But if you lift this panel up, it's a wireless charger, which is kind of cool. You stick your phone in there, it'll charge, and you can put this panel on top of it if you don't want to see your phone while you're driving. You just want to keep it in there and charge it, whatever. So that's nice to have. And speaking of storage in this car, you have a glove box, the bottom of the passenger side of the dashboard, of course, but above that, you also have this little compartment where you can stick stuff. I like having this extra storage compartment. It adds a little little bit more practicality in this interior, and this compartment also has a USB-C port for charging built into it, which is a great idea for charging devices for the passenger. You can leave something in this storage compartment and have it charged with a built-in charge port right there. And speaking of charging, this car also has other charge ports in the front. You can see 3 different ones next to each other: USB-C, USB-A, and a cigarette lighter style charge port. So there's a lot of charging in the new Defender. Next up, another cool feature in this car, Jaguar Land Rover models have this, but other brands don't, is a built-in door blind spot system. This little feature here will turn on and activate if like there's a cyclist or another car coming up if you're in park and trying to open your door. And that way you don't have to like turn around and look. You can just trust that to let you know if something's coming behind you, so you shouldn't open your door. That's a pretty cool feature. Also cool in here is the center control stack, which is this little pad of buttons and dials. Not too many controls in here, but you have a lot of different stuff, including all of your climate controls. That's not integrated into the center screen. It's all in these fixed buttons, so you don't have to go into menus to change your climate controls, which is nice. And here's one very clever hidden trick with this center control stack. These dials control the air temperature. As you can see, you twist them and the climate control temperature changes. But if you push them, they also control your heated and cooled seats. You push them one direction for heated and the other direction for cooled. So 2 functions in one dial. And we're not done yet. If you press this upper button in the center of the dial, then the left dial becomes your terrain response system control. And you can switch between all of your different drive modes, including that new dynamic mode, which is pretty neat. And the lower portion of this center button, press that, and the right dial becomes your fan speed control. So then you move that to change the fan speed. So you have many different functions integrated into these 2 dials, which is neat because it cleans up some clutter in this center control stack. You don't have to have 5 different dials for all this stuff. You get these 2 dials, which do it all. It really is clever. With that said, one drawback to these climate controls in the center, there is no button in this climate control pad to sync the passenger climate temperature and the driver climate temperature, meaning that once the passenger changes their temperature separate from the driver for the first time, you will never be able to sync them back up so that just changing one dial changes them both. That sync button is buried in the infotainment system in some menu you will never find. So every time you want to change your climate control temperature in front, you will have to adjust both dials, not just one. A minor annoyance, but an annoyance nonetheless. One other annoyance of this car and the new Defender in general is that it really does not have a very good driver assist system. It has adaptive cruise control that'll speed up, slow down, come to a complete stop based on the speed of the car in front of you, which is nice, but it won't self-steer. There is a lane keeping assist feature that'll sort of guide you back if you start to drift out, but that is no longer good enough. More and more cars, especially at this price point, have a self-steering system. You can be hands-off and the car will do it for you, but not the new Defender. Land Rover is lagging behind here, and I'm pretty disappointed not to have that feature on my new Defender, considering so many less expensive cars offer it and do it well. And so those are the quirks and features of the bizarre and exciting Land Rover Defender 90 V8. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new V8 Defender, let's hit it. All right, a couple things. I've been driving this car around for a couple days now, and I gotta say, the decision to do this in the 2-door, I don't know about that one. It is amazingly quirky and bizarre, and I think long-term, this is gonna go down as one of the strangest cars from this era. People are gonna say, remember when Land Rover made a 2-door V8 Defender? And they're gonna be hard to find. Not that many people are gonna buy them, but they're out there, and this is a very unusual and interesting car from this era. But this car shouldn't be a 2-door. Here's the thing. Jeep didn't do a 2-door Wrangler 392 because the car would probably be a little unsettled. It's an enormous amount of power in a relatively small car, and this car feels a little unsettled. When you accelerate, you get going incredibly fast. The whole car squats down, the hood pulls up, and it just moves, which is bizarre in itself. But when you really get going at speed, the front end feels a little light, the whole car feels a little unsettled. You're just not exactly sure what is going on. And at full acceleration, this car has a tendency to feel like you're not the most stable vehicle on the road. Now, To me, that adds to just the pure insanity of this vehicle, the fact that such a thing exists. But I now understand, though, why there's no two-door V8 Wrangler, and this car basically is that, except more luxurious. But I will say, when you're really going, it does start to feel, you're just not really sure exactly where you fit in the world. The steering is not incredibly precise. You're very tall, you're very short. These are not the proportions you want for a vehicle that is going 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. It's just not. This car, I thought on paper it was insane, 170 inches long in a 520 horsepower V8, but driving it is actually even more insane because it really doesn't make you feel incredibly confident that this was the right choice by the automaker. However, with that said, there's no question that this thing is just damn cool. It is a V8 Defender 2-door, just an unbelievably cool car. And I'm really thrilled that they made it. It's sort of a rival to AMG G-Wagons. One interesting thing about this vehicle, though, there's not that much personalization you can do. Only 3 colors, the blue brakes on all of them, only 2 wheel choices. I think there's only 2 interiors. Land Rover clearly views this as like more of a unique, low volume, like special production car, as opposed to Mercedes with G-Wagon, where you can get any color and any interior, and they're very into personalization. This is, I think, intended to be like a very, very special vehicle that is not going to be made in big numbers. And to me, that makes sense. So I own the new Land Rover Defender, the 2020 model, basically the same car, just 4 doors and with a rational 6-cylinder engine. And a lot of people, when this was announced, said, don't you regret getting your Defender because you want the V8? No, I do not. I already get like 17 miles per gallon driving it around. This thing is EPA rated at 16 combined city and highway, but I think you're not going to get that high. I strongly suspect this thing doesn't break 13, 14, 15, and if you really start to push it, like flooring it on the highway just now for the last few minutes, I'm getting 6. So this is not going to be a particularly desirable vehicle for a large swath of consumers, and especially for me. I'm already doing poorly enough. Plus, the other thing about me and my Defender, I really wanted a utilitarian truck Defender. So I got all the off-road options and basically nothing else except for the larger engine. I have a cloth interior, not leather. I don't have the expensive sound system. I don't even have a center console. I have a front bench seat that you can sit 3 across. Like, that's what I wanted in my truck. I wanted it to be utilitarian and capable. And this V8 version is incredibly expensive, highly luxurious, Alcantara everywhere, big wheels. It's not what I was looking for. And frankly, I'm a little bit disappointed in Land Rover that they didn't do like a more Raptor version of this. I think a V8 Defender with big, chunky off-road tires would have been really cool. But instead they went for more of like on-road performance, where you have the big wheels, the dynamic mode, the blue big brakes. Like they went for more of like a performance Defender, and I was hoping for like a Raptor Defender. Overall, I'm happy with my 2020 Defender. Adding a V8 only ups the crazy factor even more. I think most rational people will want their V8 Defender with 4 doors. That's just gonna be the way that virtually all of these are ordered. But I really do love the concept of a 2-door V8 Defender. It just seems so insane. Can't believe they did it, and it's fast and it feels fast, and it's exceptionally exciting that it exists and it's fun to drive. And here it is, the V8 Defender, 520 horsepower in this tiny little thing. And so that's the new 2022 Land Rover Defender 90 V8. This is exceptionally luxurious and sports car fast and off-road capable and extremely expensive. Naturally, I love it. No one could possibly ever need this vehicle, and that's what makes it so appealing. Anyway, now it's time to give the Defender 90 V8 a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 62 out of 100, which places the Defender 90 V8 relatively low on this list of other high-performance SUVs and trucks. The Defender 90 V8 is a hilarious and exciting vehicle, and its problem certainly isn't performance. In fact, its weekend score beats out the Ford F-150 Raptor, and the Defender is quicker in a drag race than a Raptor too. The Defender's real issue is with practicality, as it's the only 2-door SUV on this list, so it's hampered by space constraints for most shoppers. It's also quite expensive given those constraints, and those two factors will combine to make this an exceptionally rare car.